Hello and welcome to the Speaking Archaeologically lecture on understanding Indus Valley Pottery. Through this lecture, we shall attempt to address some of the main questions pertaining to study of archaeological pottery in general and Indus Valley pottery in particular. The first among these is why we study archaeological pottery at all. We will then go from here to evaluate how archaeologists study pottery and how it is used as a dating tool. The final part of this lecture will talk about how Indus Valley pottery has been studied so far and what sort of approaches should probably be factored in by future researchers interested in studying Indus Valley pottery. Let us first begin by understanding why pottery is studied at all archaeologically. Simply put, this is because it is one of the major artifacts to be recovered from any archaeological site. Pottery, unlike other forms of material culture, survives in the form of small sherds, rims, bases, and fragments. In addition to this, if the sample retrieved remains uncontaminated and is carefully retrieved from the context, it is datable using the thermoluminescence technique. Other than these reasons, pottery, especially if it's found in various shapes, sizes, fabric, and finish, becomes the most ready source for an archaeologist to determine the socio-economic lifestyle of a site. The quantities of pottery sherds, kilns, and associated materials of make indicate whether the site was rural or urban. And if a site yields pottery from other parallel civilizations or cultures, it also then serves as a useful indicator to understand trading patterns. So, for example, if I were to find pottery from Indus Valley in a Mesopotamian site, I can then establish direct trade relations between the two cultures. Similarly, if a site yields a lot of different varieties of pots, some coarse in nature and others fine with decorations and paint on them, we can then distinguish not just the utility of these pots, but also the urban or rural nature, as well as the socio-economic patterns of a particular site, such as interdining cultures, community gatherings, etc. Having discussed this, let us now look at how do archaeologists study pottery. There are broadly two ways of studying pottery in archaeology. The first is on the basis of fabric. When we consider the fabric of pottery, we generally look into the basic clay, the kind of inclusions that a pot possibly has, and the kind of decorations or striations that we can see on the outside surface of the pot. Additionally, focusing on the technique of make and observing whether the pot was handmade or wheel-turned also is useful for understanding pottery through its fabric. The second type of study is on the basis of form, which broadly translates to the typology of the vessels. Typology may be on the basis of the color of the clay, decorations on the pot, or the basic utility the pot as a vessel sought to meet in its time. So based on the use, therefore, a pot can be typologically understood as a vessel for cooking, storage, drinking, or keeping liquids in. Simply put, fine wares would sit on the table for formal dining and would count as the historic version of tablewares. They would also most likely be imported if we were dealing with an urban civilization. Thus, fine pots from a civilization would be both posh and thin. Coarse wares, on the other hand, would probably be used for storage or cooking. These would mostly be local. Usually, the coarse wares can be spotted with the residue of carbon on it, on the inside as well as the outside. Another important observation here would be that coarse ware would generally have inclusions or temper in it. This could be calcified rocks, bones, broken pots, or quartz. This was usually done because it allowed the pot to expand and contract without breaking and cracking, and added the element of thermal resistivity when the pot was subjected to fire. This also holds true in case of Indus Valley pottery, where cooking ware can often be isolated from the fine ware just by looking at the inside of the pot and noticing the kind of inclusions. Having discussed all of this, let us now look at pottery as a dating tool. We know already that an uncontaminated piece of pot, carefully retrieved from the site, can be dated using thermoluminescence. However, what is the significance of doing so? Well, this lies in the fact that pottery changes over time in terms of shape, which can help an archaeologist look into development of pottery techniques as time passed for a particular culture or civilization. Also, pottery can be indirectly associated with coin evidence and historically dated incidents. So depending on the context where it was found and the stratigraphy or the layer from which it was retrieved, pottery can be used as a very significant dating tool, helping us to determine and sometimes reconfirm the dates that we have retrieved from the other sources. Now that the basics of pottery studies in archaeology have been understood, let us shift our focus to Indus Valley Pottery. So far, only a single typology has been adopted with respect to Indus Valley Pottery, and it has only been studied with respect to color diversity of the fabric of its make. Focus thus has mainly been on designs in clay color, and generalized opinions have been formed based on the areas of the finds. Stratigraphically, however, the pottery finds were never mapped. So even after extensive years of research in Indus Valley pottery, we cannot claim as archaeologists that our studies on Indus Valley pottery do any justice to development of pottery cultures in Indus Valley civilization. Also, our approach towards the Indus Valley pottery on the basis of vessel use, new forms and shape remains limited. We do, however, possess some knowledge about the process of manufacture of an Indus Valley pot, especially with respect to the mature Harappan phase. The first step of this was clay preparation, which was then followed by forming a pot either using hand-operated wheel or foot wheel. The pot was then dried in the sun and later fired in a kiln. Evidence of kilns have been found from several Indus Valley sites to show that the pot was fired in case of mature Harappan pottery at the very least. Once fired and solidified, the decoration came into place. Accordingly, as per need and utility, several pots were decorated using slipware, burning, paint, as well as incised decoration. Archaeologically, the life of any pot can be understood with a simple line diagram. Any pot, whether pertaining to Indus Valley civilization or outside it, is first manufactured. It is then distributed and used, and gets discarded if it's broken. These discarded pieces find their way into post-depositional deterioration, often burnt with the rubbish. Thus, very abraded pieces of pot, which can no longer be used or burnt or employed for any other kind of reuse, find their way back into the mud, redeposited. This redeposition is archaeologically recovered. If we were to study this diagram in reverse, then you find yourself at the base first, which is archaeological recovery. And from that point, you can then trace everything backwards, right to the point of manufacture. Let us now look at a few pottery sherds which have been archaeologically recovered from different sites. Let us also look at the drawings of these pots, which were reconstructed using archaeological reconstruction. Whilst studying pottery, it must be remembered that rims and bases are perhaps the most useful parts of a pot to attempt a reconstruction of any kind. Rims can then be placed on a rim chart, which looks like this, and their estimated diameter as well as the number of fragments that they have been broken into can be ascertained using this method. Consequently, one typology of study that can also be employed to Indus Valley pots can be based on rim and rim typology. This is useful in understanding various techniques of make. To quite an extent, it also helps us determine the size of the intact pot. This rather statistical study of ceramic assemblage is called the EVE method, also known as the estimated vessel equivalent. It is by far one of the most suitable proposed measures for which each measurable fragment of a pot is scored as a fraction of a complete vessel. Apart from being extremely statistical, it also offers a scientific way of studying pot. So even though the method is not without limitations, it is fairly easy to understand. Considering the number of intact pots that have been retrieved from Indus Valley sites, especially from the Nal and Soti cultures, as well as the mature Harappan phase, a typology based on vessel use can also be adopted to study Indus Valley pots. This will give us better insight on kiln technology, social customs, and dining practices of the age. Indus Valley pottery can also be studied on the basis of technique of make. Pots therefore can be classified as handmade or wheel-turned, fired or unfired, small scale or large scale in terms of production, or created within new created workshops. An approach like this would help us understand the level of technical know-how, the economic scale of the site, trade and specialization, and whether the economy was self-sufficient or monetary for a particular site. Studies such as these will enable the error of generalization in case of Indus Valley pottery, which unfortunately seems mostly the case with all Indus Valley artifacts, which have been clubbed together without keeping into account that Indus Valley civilization literally spread from between 8000 to 7000 BCE to about 1500 to 1200 BCE, and must have undergone a lot of development from its incipience to the time of its decline. Bearing this particular point in mind, a stratigraphic mapping of the pottery along with variations in typology can also be attempted, especially for any sites which are still being excavated. This would help in scientifically collecting and sorting material during an excavation and effectively records primary data whilst people are still on site. The purpose of our little talk today was to look into different techniques with which archaeological pottery can be studied. Whilst the case study we took into consideration involved Indus Valley pottery, these techniques, and especially the approaches listed in the end, can be applied to the study of almost any pottery from any site, from any period in history as well as prehistory. After all, we must not forget that pottery happens to be one of the major artifacts to be recovered from any archaeological site. It survives, is dateable, and helps understand the socio-economic lifestyle of a site. Things that we've already talked about in the introduction when we wonder and ponder as to why archaeologists really study pottery. Hopefully, this lecture will give you new perspectives on the study of pottery, and a lot of you will be encouraged to undertake a systematic study of pottery sherds after this.